Week 1, Overview, Twilight of the Western Roman Empire. This is the first week of Unit 1, the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages are the years of European history between two other ages, the Ancient, or Classical period, and the Modern one. Thus, this name was given to the years between the fall of the Roman Empire and the start of the period which saw both the Protestant Reformation and the Renaissance. We date the Middle Ages from the division of the Roman Empire in AD 395 to the beginning of the Protestant Reformation in the 1500s. If your family used Tapestry of Grace last year, you may remember that we wrapped up our study of the ancient world with the fall of Rome. There were barbarians at the gates, and civilization was on the retreat all over Europe. That's where we'll pick up the thread of history this year. Constantine, the first Christian emperor, moved his capital from Rome to a city called Byzantium in what is now Turkey. Constantine renamed it New Rome, but people called it Constantinople, Constantine's city. Constantinople became the capital of the Eastern Empire when the Roman Empire permanently split in AD 395. Constantine did more to Rome than just build a new capital. He ended the official persecution of Christianity and then established it as the preferred religion of the empire. That made it safe to be a Christian, even profitable. Before long, everybody who wanted to get ahead among people of influence claimed to be a believer. This increased the quantity of Christians, but not the quality. Under Constantine's leadership, bishops gathered in the first great church council to decide a question that was threatening Christian unity. The great theological question of the day was the nature of Christ. Who and what is Jesus exactly? Arius, one popular teacher, argued that the Son of God was not God exactly, but was the first being that God had created. Arius said, "If the Father begat the Son, he that was begotten had a beginning of existence, and from this it is evident that there was a time when the Son was not. It therefore necessarily follows that he had his substance from nothing, and that God has not always been Father. There was a moment when he was alone and was not yet Father. Later he became so. The Son is not from eternity. He came from nothing." What Arius taught back then is essentially what Jehovah's Witnesses believe today. Jehovah's Witnesses believe Arius was right about the nature of Christ, and they don't object to being identified as Arians. The problem is that it makes quite a difference whether Christ really is God or only God's first creation. The 4th century church leaders thought that what Arius was teaching had to be opposed. Unfortunately, when Christians disagree, they don't always do so in a Christian manner. The controversy began to get ugly. Constantine gathered church leaders to resolve the dispute. In AD 324, the Council of Nicaea condemned Arius's teachings as heresy and affirmed that Jesus was completely divine. The council drafted the Nicene Creed, which, in its original form, ended with this very specific anathema: "But those who say there was a time when he was not, and he was not before he was made, and he was made out of nothing, or he is of another substance, or essence, or the Son of God is created, or changeable, or alterable, they are condemned by the Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church." Despite this council and creed, the view that Jesus Christ was not truly God continued to be taught in the Eastern Roman Empire during the 300s. Many of these so-called barbarians who attacked Rome from the east were Arians. So, who were these barbarians? While Rome lasted, they were the wild tribes beyond the borders. Many of them routinely raided the rich Roman provinces. Rome's troops kept them at bay. In Britain, Hadrian's Wall helped hold back the Picts and the Scots. When Roman rule collapsed, though, there was nothing to hold them back anymore, and waves of invaders swept over Europe. Many of these invaders were migrating west to escape from invaders of their own. The Huns, ferocious horsemen from the depths of Asia, were attacking the settlements of Eastern Europe. The Huns may have been from Mongolia originally. Attila the Hun was the fiercest of them all. He conquered and ruled lands from Russia to Holland, from the Black Sea to the Baltic. He fought against both halves of the old Roman Empire, Rome and Byzantium. He marched on Rome itself, but for some mysterious reason decided not to attack after a meeting with Pope Leo I, who met with him. The Hun invasions dislodged the various Goth tribes from their homelands. The Goths were a Germanic people that have lived in most of Europe. Archaeologists believe they originated in Scandinavia, moved to Poland, then migrated down near the Black Sea in what is now the Ukraine. When the Huns came, they broke up into two main groups. The eastern groups were called Ostrogoths, and the western ones were Visigoths. Both began mass migrations that ended up attacking Rome. The Visigoths migrated from the shores of the Black Sea down to Greece, and then up through the Balkans and down into Italy. They moved into the Roman Empire in 376 AD. They reached Rome in 410 and sacked the city, throwing the civilized world into panic. They didn't stop there, though. They continued their migrations across the south of France and into Spain. By the time they finally came to a halt, they had covered Sweden, Poland, Germany, Russia, Ukraine, Greece, most of the Balkan states, Italy, France, and Spain. That's quite a trip. The next barbarians to sack Rome were the Vandals. They were on the run from the Huns, too. They migrated across the middle of Europe to France and Spain, taking a more direct route than the Visigoths, and they went a good deal further than their fellow barbarians. They crossed the Straits of Gibraltar to Africa, where they conquered Carthage and took to piracy. Rome was too busy dealing with Attila and the Huns to do much about pirates, but when Attila died, Rome struck back. So did the Vandals, though. They looted Rome in 455. Rome wasn't built in a day, so they say, and it didn't fall in a day either. Even though the city was sacked more than once, Roman rule still continued throughout most of the empire. In far-off Britain, for example, things continued as they had for centuries, except that Rome's legions were called home to defend the core provinces, and there were no new soldiers to defend the borders. The end of Rome was a slow erosion in the distant provinces, not a sudden collapse. Historians often date the end of the Western Roman Empire to 476 A.D., when a Germanic leader, Odoacer, deposed the last emperor, a teenage boy named Caesar Romulus Augustulus. Remember, Romulus founded Rome, and Augustus was her first emperor. It's one of history's ironies that the last Roman ruler should be Romulus Augustulus. Romulus Augustulus was the last emperor because Odoacer did not claim the title of Caesar. He called himself just King of Italy. Odoacer was clever. He knew that the Byzantine emperor, Zeno, would view him as a threat if he took the title of Caesar. His strategy worked for a while, but eventually Zeno sent Theodoric, king of the Ostrogoths, to attack Odoacer. Odoacer surrendered 17 years after he took power, and he was executed on the Ides of March, March 15th, A.D. 493. Thus it was that the man who took over from the last Roman emperor died on the same day as Julius Caesar, who paved the way for Caesar Augustus, the first emperor. How do you suppose the Romans felt about the collapse of their 1,000-year-old culture? It must have seemed like the end of the world to many of the Romans. Some pagan citizens blamed the collapse on Christianity. They thought Christians were weak. They feared that Christians had angered the gods who made Rome great. Back in the good old days, when everybody worshipped Mars and Venus, we didn't have all these barbarian problems. St. Augustine, bishop of the North African city of Hippo, tried to answer these pagan critics. His City of God explains how a just and good God could allow the barbarians to conquer the great city of Rome. Augustine argued that there were always two cities on earth, two different communities. One, the city of man, is what we see around us. But there's also a city of God, made up of God's redeemed people, that will stand even when Rome falls. Many Romans blamed Rome's fall on the Christians. Augustine rebutted that argument. He went back through Roman history, detailing all the evils that led to Rome's collapse. Augustine argued that Rome's virtue had made her strong. During the great days of the Roman Republic, individual Romans exemplified character qualities like self-control, diligence, frugality, patriotism. After the Republic turned into an empire, however, those virtues were hard to find. Romans were more interested in power, pleasure, and wealth than in the good of their homes or homeland. Rome's fall left a great vacuum in Western Europe. The Byzantine Empire in the east kept a fair amount of classical culture alive for centuries, but the area that's now Italy, France, Spain, Germany, and Britain reverted to savagery. From Constantine to Luther, Western Europe became generally united in one Roman Catholic Church. This union of church and state was called Christendom. Martin Luther led the Protestants out of that church, dividing Christendom and ending the Middle Ages. We'll get to that in the next unit. For now, let's enjoy learning together about the 1,000 years we call the Middle Ages.